the Institute of Traffic Engineers Parking Generation Manual, and the Planning Advisory Service reports, and also looking at other ordinances to see what they have. We follow the same process when we deal with the Board of Zoning Appeals when someone comes in and asks for an interpretation of what the parking would be. Generally speaking, when the BZA does that, they're really looking at a similar use or something like that and trying to interpolate the ordinance with regards to that. I included there a list of various determinations that were made by the Board of Zoning Appeals. One was parking spaces for a daycare center. That's 1 per employee plus 1 per 25 children. We've actually used this for a few daycares, the most recent one being the Primrose School. The other one is parking spaces for a pavilion developed as part of a residential recreation facility. I included both the staff recommendation and the BZA action. Now, the staff recommendation was 1 space per 400 square feet of gross floor area of the pavilion, or a minimum of 3 parking spaces, whichever is greater, whereas the BZA went with 3 parking spaces per 200 square feet of gross floor area of the pavilion. The reason I'm showing both of these perspectives is because, first of all, the BZA vote was split, so it was a 3-2 vote. But also, restaurants currently require 1 parking space per 100 square feet, and to require more parking for pavilions is not in sync with the research we conducted at that time, and so we would still recommend the 1 per 400 with a minimum of 3. Also developed that parking spaces, there would be no parking spaces required for arbors or fountains when they're developed as part of residential recreational facilities. What we'd like to do at this time is to go with the staff recommendation on the pavilion, but go with the BZA parking established for the other ones and clarify those in the ordinance so that if anybody else comes before the town, they don't have to know the history of the BZA, that they can actually look it up in the ordinance.
Ruth, what was the justification for the 3 for 200?
Well, let's just say this had to do with the farm at Willow Creek. And there was some concerns, and they were valid concerns, and I understood why they did that.
Now that's enough said. That makes sense. So they obviously were under 200, so therefore they didn't meet the 200 square foot threshold.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a very specific, and that's why, you know, there was nothing wrong with what the BZA did, but they were looking at a very specific scenario at that particular time, and staff was looking at a generic, this is what we have found in doing our research, and we understood why they made the ruling they made in that particular situation, but we still feel that to amend the ordinance, really going with what the IT and the past reports state makes more sense.
Just to clarify, you're definite, basically, a pavilion is an arbor with a roof.
Yes.
Okay, and that's the difference. You put a roof over it, you're going to have some assembly use. You're going to have folks picnics, hence the need for some parking. Okay.
Right. Kind of like what we have at the park. You know,
right.
people gather there, and it doesn't matter if it's raining. It's a place out of the weather,
okay.
Or you know, the sun and that kind of thing.
Difference. As soon as you build a structure with a roof, that's what triggers it.
Right.
Okay.
Definition of a residential recreational facility.
It's what is accompanies when you have a residential development and you build a recreational facility.
In
Your
a
pool
subdivision
house.
development.
Neighborhood.
In the neighborhood.
Got any good example of where they exist, these things?
Well, there used to be arbors in the Battery at Berkeley Park, and press wasn't here, we could have the fun, what I was going to say, but
I remember that discussion.
They are no longer there.
Did you need to go to the restroom?
There's a couple of pavilions in Fox Run.
Pavilions? Yes, there are pavilions in Fox Run. I was talking about the arbors. There were arbors in the Battery at Berkeley Park, in that, like, open space in the middle. You know, you kind of had that big boulevard, and that was their open space in the middle. They've disappeared.
Baldwin Park. There's an arbor.
They have
There's an arbor in the middle of Baldwin Park.
There is a difference between an arbor and a pergola. Pergola is much bigger. You get the vines growing, and you could actually,
I didn't know there was a difference between an arbor and a pergola.
An arbor is actually an entrance feature. Yes, when we went through that, I learned a lot about arbors and pergolas.
So they have both. They have an arbor and a pergola. that
Yeah,
right?
you're right,
With
they
a little
do.
gate, and then they
Yes,
got the pergola.
and then they
Okay.
got- yes.
So there's,
What's the issue with the arbors?
I know my brain's fried from work today, and it's maybe stupid, but what in the heck are the parking space for arbors and fountains in the context of what the BZA did? Was somebody wanting one, not wanting some?
Again, we are going back to the farm at Willow Creek.
Well, I have a fundamental dumb question.
Why does the arbor need a park?
When does the BZA establish parking requirements?
If you look at that first paragraph under the introduction,
Yeah, I
it
had that
states the
question
minimum
already.
number of off-street park. You actually voted against that, by the way, that 3 per 200, just so I went back and checked.
Consistent.
Says the minimum number of off-street parking spaces provided in all districts at such time any building or structure is erected or enlarged or increased in capacity shall be determined in accordance with the specific uses as set forth below. For uses not specifically mentioned herein, off-street parking requirements shall be determined by the Board of Zoning Appeals. Just the way our ordinance has always been written. The idea is that go through a text amendment is about a 3.5-month process. If there is a similar use, for example, we have tennis court parking requirements on country clubs. If somebody comes in with tennis courts, we're going to go with, the same parking requirements as was under park, But yes,
I guess what we were really saying is that the BZA said we're not gonna require parking for somebody to go enjoy an arbor or a fountain.
What you're trying to do is you're trying to get it in the zoning ordinance and not buried in the BZA. So if somebody from the outside looking in wants to get online, go to MuniCode and look it up, there it is.
yeah,
Okay.
basically, it's kind of like if I'm a developer and I have an open space and I want to add some features to it, and I'm like, well, I really don't want to add parking because that changes the feel of an open space. And they go through and they're like, well, if I do certain things, I'm going to have to add parking. But if I do a nice fountain or an arbor or something like that, those are features I can add, and I know I don't have to accommodate for parking.
Consider those more of like a passive recreational versus
But
an
they're not,
active
yeah, and they're
recreation.
not generally speaking gathering points.
Right, okay.
They're more aesthetic points than they are gathering points, whereas the pavilion is a gathering point.
It's really a housekeeping thing. These are things that we
Yes,
already have
these are
established.
housekeeping
We're just
things.
trying to put them in the right location.
Yep. And I'd write an ordinance for you next month, and we'd be good to go.
Sounds good.
Okay.
next, and you have all the information you need, I suppose, from us.
Yes, as long as you're good with what
Yeah.
the staff recommendation versus the BZA
Okay.
recommendation.
Discussion on amendments to the Farragut zoning ordinance, chapter 3, section 12, general commercial district C-1, to clarify similar uses established by the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Actually, I combined 5 and 6 in my write-up just because the numbers ended up being identical in both the C2 and the C1 district with regards to determinations that had been made by the Board of Zoning Appeals. The Board of Zoning Appeals is charged with making determinations, as with the parking, in this particular case, is making determinations of what is a similar use. So, going through all the BZA minutes, we found that there was, the current text is commercial greenhouses, nurseries, and other similar uses as determined by the Board of Zoning Appeals, and then it has a list of criteria. The BZA determination was that outdoor storage and sale of mulch and other landscaping-related materials is not similar to a greenhouse or nursery. And so we would clarify that in the description that we don't mean to include outdoor storage and sale of mulch and other landscaping-related materials. This determination was made a while back. I can vaguely remember the details of it, but what is important about this is I had a call a couple of weeks ago by someone that said they were wanting to do a processing of mulch and store it. So if you've been down the interstate going toward downtown, that's why the determination was no, it's not similar, because it can have quite an odor to it. And it's all right if you're selling it as part of your nursery, but if you have large quantities, it can be a very unpleasant next-door neighbor. This next one was the miniature golf courses, driving ranges, batting cages, tennis courts, and other similar non-motorized recreational vehicles. The BZA made two separate determinations. One was that inflatable paintball structures are a similar use, and that inflatable playground structures are a similar use, and then that paintball facilities are a similar use. The whole idea behind that is they're non-motorized, and we went into great detailed discussion when we were talking about the wakeboard and it being electric and the noise, and it doesn't just affect residential, it affects adjacent commercial, particularly if you have an outdoor seating area or something like that. And so what we are proposing for both the C1 and the C2 district, we would amend those subsections and adding these other clarifying that the mulch and stuff is not considered similar, and that the inflatable playground and paintball facilities would be allowed.
So do we have a zoning district that would allow the mulch sales and the landscaping material sales?
Sell it as part of the nursery, but it can't be the principal aspect of it.
I'm thinking of the material yard down at Dixie Junction on the Loudoun County side that sells the landscaping rocks, and they sell sand and gravel. I don't think they sell mulch.
That is part of their nursery.
Well, they're not really a nursery in the traditional sense that I think of as selling any kind of live goods.
Are we talking about the same?
No,
I think we're talking about two different
We're
places.
talking about the one that's on highway. I'm just thinking about if somebody comes.
Headed toward Avalon.
I think it's called Twin Lake Materials, and it's
Okay,
on the
yeah,
right.
we're thinking of two different
Okay.
ones.
I think it's Charles Rocks.
Yeah, they sell rocks and things, but it's a lot of landscaping things, but they also sell gravel and sand. And I'm just curious if I agree, that is a different use than a nursery because you're dealing with heavier equipment and equipment that's noisier and moving things around. I'm just thinking, so are we going to include this use anywhere in our zoning ordinance, or is this something that's specifically prohibited in the town?
Currently, it is not permitted in the town.
Okay.
And if you want to amend it to permit it somewhere, realistically, the only district that it would be allowed in would be the C2 district. That happens to be the location where I got the request about the large-scale volume of storage of mulch, which I'm sure the hotel owners immediately next door would not have been very happy.
Okay.
On-site mulching of trees and stuff when you do the clearing, that's acceptable?
Have a temporary thing versus more of a
If you're cutting down
established.
trees and mulching like what Costco's doing up there, we kind of want them to do that because it's a great erosion control measure. But if you're talking about selling it, it's kind of a temporary. Usually they're hauled off because they don't want to sit around and wait. They got to get going.
Sometimes they'll mix it with their on-site topsoil and then landscape with it. It's a pretty good. It kind of recycles it instead of just taking it to a landfill somewhere.
I have a question about the inflatable playground structures. How are they considered permanent?
Oftentimes they aren't permanent, but they wouldn't want to have to get a permit every time they want to pop them up. Usually they're around just during the summer months, but there are permanent aspects of them, like their motors and what they're affixed to and that sort of thing. So they design for it, but they wouldn't necessarily leave them out because particularly like tonight, it's supposed to get down below freezing. That would destroy that plastic and it would no longer function. But for example, Surgoonies, when they're closed part of the winter season. So when they are open, they don't want to come back before the planning commission every time and get reapproval and
But aren't they motorized? They have.
it's not much different than like a
They have go-karts, don't they?
unit.
Not in
Well, they have go-karts, but that's why, that was actually one of the things with the, when this ordinance was written, Surgoonies was already in existence, but we were also getting a lot of complaints from neighbors about the motorized
Okay.
activities.
We want another Surgoonies in the town of Ariel.